Okay guys, welcome to HipHughes History. War of 1812. WTH is going on about that. In this social studies lecture, guys, we're going to rip her up. We're going to talk about causes, effects, the major ideas about the players and what's going on with the War of 1812. Nothing too detail-orientated. If you're a student or a lifelong learner, there's other places to stick your head into a million facts. We're going to keep it simple because I think ideas are really important. Context is really important. So line her up, let's get her going, knock them down, giddy up. The War of 1812. All right, we always start with causes, and I think the major cause, and certainly if you're going to be tested on this, they like to test kids a lot, the major answer on a test is trade restriction and impressment. So Great Britain at this time period, a few years before in 1807, had passed something in the Parliament with the Prime Minister, basically doing trade restrictions with the United States, not allowing them, using the British naval forces, to stop merchant ships from trading with Europe. And really this is a move to get America, which was neutral in the war, from being able to trade arms and make money off arms to France, the enemy of Great Britain. The Napoleonic War is going on, right? They fight like every Friday over in Europe, so they don't want the damn Americans, you damn Yankees, you rebels, we're not going to let you do it. So they started not letting us do it, and of course that's going to piss us off because we see ourselves as a neutral player, and really we should be safe in international waters. We shouldn't have to worry about these damn Brits, you know, trying to stop our ships from doing business. And then what the British started doing was they started impressing American sailors. And I don't mean impressing like, yo, look at my watch. Impressing in terms of taking them off the ship and putting them in the British Navy. The British saw British people that were born British citizens as British citizens. They didn't recognize the kind of the naturalization process that British defectors and people that joined the revolution now saw themselves as American citizens, and we certainly see them as American citizens. So it's really kind of two different, you know, eyeballs on the same thing. But certainly we see the British taking American citizens off ships and putting them in the British Navy, impressing them. And this is going to drive us batty. Not only is it just like wrong, it's really kind of a stab at our national sovereignty or our national honor. So I think like elements of nationalism start kicking in, like how dare they? These are the guys who we kick their ass, and now they're going to kind of like punk us. We know punk. Number one, trade restriction and impressment. All right? Go write it down. I think number two has to deal with Native Americans. So I'm just going to say Native Americans. Tecumseh, who is a Native American resistance fighter, somebody who is trying to unite Native American tribes kind of as one force against the Americans. We're not going to get into the Creek Wars, but Tecumseh had really kind of, I think, spooked the Americans. He was really inhibiting America from being able to complete Manifest Destiny, from moving into that Northwest territory. I'm talking about Michigan, Illinois, kind of parts of Ohio. So not only was Tecumseh a pain in our ass, and I say that lovingly and lightly, I'm not taking a side here, just the facts, but the British were supplying the Native Americans, the tribes, with arms to fight against the Americans. So in a sense, they're doing what we're doing with France. And we see that as an infringement. We see that as a big problem. And certainly by the outbreak of the war in 1812, you know, kind of the Western states and their delegation in Congress, they're raising like mighty hell about this. They want not just a war with the Native Americans, which they're getting, by the way. The Battle of Horseshoe Bend isn't far off, and the death of Tecumseh, and really the end of the idea of a Native American sovereign nation that would be supported by Great Britain in our backyard. So number two is not only Native American resistance, but the idea that Great Britain is supporting that resistance. Oh yeah. Number three. Manifest Destiny. So there's really two theories on this. One theory says that one of the causes of the War of 1812 was American expansionism, like Manifest Destiny fever, that we wanted Canada. It wasn't just like, you know, sea to shining sea, but pole to southern pole, northern pole to southern pole, and that we were the instigator, and that we invaded Canada because we wanted to annex Canada. And I'm not discounting that theory, but I've seen another theory develop which says that it was more of a defensive move, that we were really more worried about the impressment and the trade restrictions, so in a sense Canada could be like a hostage. So if we invaded Canada in the early parts of the war and we occupied it, this could be like a bargaining chip in order to get England to, or Great Britain, to drop the trade restrictions and stop the impressment. But either way, the idea of American expansionism, whether it's the perception of it or the actuality of it, is going to be one of the major reasons for the cause of 1812. Line her up, we got two more. So politics. You got to know a little bit about politics, kind of the internal dynamics of the two-party system going on at that time. And really we have the Democratic-Republican Party that's alive and well, and this is the party that supports the war. This is the old anti-federalist party now under the wing of James Madison, and the Federalist Party called it Madison's War. They saw it as a political war. Because if you know about the early two-party system, you know one thing, that the Democratic-Republicans were pro-France, and really had still negative connotations about Great Britain going back to the Revolutionary War, and the Federalists were much more pro-British. They wanted, good, healthy relationships. They saw Great Britain, in a sense, as a system that was mirror ours, and we needed to develop these ties with them. So, in many cases, the idea of now the Democratic Republicans having their chance not only to fracture an alliance with Great Britain, but to take Canada and to punk those guys, is going to be, I think, one of the background reasons for the War of 1812.
Yeah.
So, in June of 1812, the deal is done. Congress, for the first time in American history, and only one of a handful of times, votes to declare war on Great Britain. The vote was so close, it's in fact the closest vote for a declaration of war in American history. 61% in the House, 59% in the Senate. And that goes to the idea that it was really a partisan conflict. That 59%, that 60%, those are the Democratic Republicans. But the Northeast quadrant, the one that has, economic and mercantile ties with Great Britain, they were against this from the start. Not only that, but we're going to find out momentarily that it's going to lead to the Hartford Convention, which is really talking about secession and New England leaving the Union. But here we go. We got the declaration of war. We're going to throw in one more cause. We talked about those four causes, right? The fifth cause is no phone, E.T., no phone. There was no really communication system, of course, back then, so it took, maybe a month, maybe 6 weeks to relay messages. And if we had known on May 11th that the Prime Minister of Great Britain was assassinated and his replacement, Lord Liverpool, was decisively more, not pro-American, but was one of the first things he did was he got rid of the trade restrictions. And, by the time that the British got to New York City to deliver that message, we're sitting there with a declaration of war. So giddy up, we got a war. It's going to be 34, 35 months. That's almost 3 years. Let's find out some of the main things you need to know about that war. Ding dong, the war is on. So let's talk about Canada, kind of the northern theater of the war. Initially, the United States really saw this as a cakewalk, that we were going to have the states rise up with their militias, a three-prong attack, kind of Plattsburgh, Niagara, Detroit, and we would just kind of get support from the people because they didn't want colonialism either, and they would rise up and, this would be gravy. But fail. Not only did the Americans not rise to the occasion, it was very hard to get people to kind of join the American forces here. They didn't want to fight. In the Northeast, they were against the war. But the Canadians and the people, the locals, the towns that we occupied really briefly, were against us. They didn't want us there. So we're going to lose. Some limited success. Limited success in the sense that we strategically held on to Lake Erie and we won some battles in Lake Erie. Early on, we had a battle in Windsor, Ontario, that we had won. But really the winning part comes in the defeat of Tecumseh, the Battle of the Thames, where the Americans eventually killed Tecumseh and really ended or began to end, that Native American resistance that we talked about previously. But in the end, Ty, right, we're not going to really get to invade Canada, and Canada's not going to invade us. So even Steven on that front.
And it burns, 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 the ring of fire, the ring.
There's also kind of a coastal front, right? I'm not crazy, this is the coast, right? And the coastal front really deals with the British blockading the United States, so we're not able to trade. But after some of the battles over in Lake Erie and in Canada, the Great Britain had decided that they needed to teach us a lesson. So August 24th, 1814, guys, you know what happened that day? Everybody knows that. Of course they do. You don't? Major General Robert Ross invaded Washington, D.C., successfully holding Washington, D.C. for 25 hours, burning down the Treasury building. He had Dolly Madison running out with the silver. One of the slaves that worked in the White House, I say worked, that's horrible, took down the Gilbert Stuart painting of Washington, you see right here, and kind of saved that from certain destruction. So after the 25 hours, this is really interesting. Do you know what defeated the British? What got the British out of Washington, D.C.? It was a hurricane, like a major, level 4 hurricane with tornadoes swept them out. Interestingly enough, it was right after that they had the Battle of Baltimore, where they kind of came back and they were like, we show them again. And it was during the Battle of Baltimore. So for 25 hours, they bombed Fort McHenry. And it was because of the explosives that were kind of going off that came out of that building that Francis Scott Key wrote the words to the Star-Spangled Banner. So there you go. Now you can finally win on Jeopardy. So there you go. Washington burned to the ground, kind of the coastal part. I think the third big thing to know about this is really the end of the Napoleonic War. In 1814, mid-1814, as Napoleon is defeated and kind of exiled from the picture, Great Britain and France form an alliance. And because of that alliance, there's no need anymore for impressment of soldiers or for trade restrictions, so those are taken away. Really the reasons for the war in the first place. But there's one more battle to be done. The Treaty of Ghent was signed, I believe it's December 1814, the end of 1814, that really ends the war kind of in a tie. But because, again, no phone, the battles still continued. So the one big battle that we won was the battle after the war had ended, and that would be the Battle of New Orleans. And it was in the Battle of New Orleans that a famous American made his mark. Of course you know that, right? Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson wins the battle after the war, catapulting him eventually into the White House. History is awesome, guys. There you go, guys. There's the War of 1812 on a platter of learning. We hope that you got the basics. If you want more details, we'll throw a few links down there. You can springboard off and read until your eyes fall out of your head. But stick a fork in me because I'm done. There you go, guys. Check out other videos. Make sure you subscribe and check out some of the other EDU people down below in the description that are going to rock your brain. There you go. Where attention goes, energy flows, guys. We'll see you next time.